Next slide's from the Holy Innocents Episcopal School. Their religion class, the teacher came in and said that we're no longer going to say, hey guys, you're all going to say, hey y'all, and I want you to practice this. Right now we're going to all say it together, hey y'all, because that's not an inclusive statement. And not everyone identifies in that way. The next few slides are...
Hold on one second.
Yeah.
We've got a full room here. When anyone is at the podium speaking, we're going to respect them. We're not going to allow any outbursts. Just want to make that very clear. Thank you.
What is going on in the schools? A lot, it would appear, but little of it seems to have much to do with educating young people.
Who pays your salary? Shame on you.
What had been planned as a typical school board meeting in Virginia's wealthy Loudoun County this week devolved into pandemonium.
Shame on you! Shame on you!
With hundreds of parents flooding an auditorium to accuse the school system of teaching their kids that racism in America is structural and systemic, something the school board denies is part of the curriculum. Things got so heated that the board members eventually walked out, leaving the police to deal with the unruly crowd.
When politics infiltrate schools, it's a sad thing, but it's also a very natural thing considering the government technically runs the public school system and determines funding for it. And local school board positions are voted on in local elections. Nobody listens to me when I say you gotta vote local. It will have the most felt impact on you and your family and your community. Even if you don't have school-aged children, pay attention to what goes on with your local school board, because those children are a part of your community and they will grow up to be adults in your community. Now, as I'm sure you all know by now, because I feel like I say it in like every other video, I live in Texas, and the things going on in Texas give a lot of us pause. Our state government is trying to siphon money out of the public school system so that private schools, most of which are religious schools, can get some of those public funds. I know that I talked about the Texas voucher program in another video we did back in July, so I'm not going to rehash the point, but if you want, you can check out that video to learn more about it. Now, just outside of Beaumont, Texas, which is over on the east side of Texas, a middle school teacher was fired for assigning an unapproved illustrated version of the Diary of Anne Frank to her students. The spokesperson for the school district said that the teacher read a passage from the book in which Frank, who was barely a teenager when she began writing her diary, described male and female genitalia. Again, we're talking about middle school kids here, kids who are around the same age as Frank was when she first wrote these passages. Now that said, there are versions of the text that omit those passages, but the particular version that was assigned to this classroom remained loyal to the original text. I am a literature purist. I don't personally love the idea of altering any author's work in any way, especially not after they've died, but I'm not sitting on any school boards. Another district in the Dallas-Fort Worth area removed the unabridged diary from its own library, and this graphic novel edition was removed from a high school in Vero Beach, Florida. Now, I will let you decide what the real motivation was for removing this particular book from school libraries, but it is a shame to discount the messages of an entire book and deprive people of the experience of reading a book just because some people don't like one or two passages within it, passages that aren't even particularly relevant to the rest of the book. People are going to feel differently about this, and that's fine. I think a somewhat reasonable argument could be made for the abridged version to remain in schools in the name of compromise. Sure, if I was a mother or a teacher, I would be willing to meet halfway on that point. Overall, though, we're falling back into puritanical purity culture, which, as we've seen historically, does not serve the youth well. I've read the unabridged diary, as I'm sure many of you have, and this 13-year-old girl doesn't discuss anything that other 13-year-olds aren't already thinking about and don't already have questions about. We literally learn through reading. We experience the world through books. We explore different thoughts and ideas and perspectives by immersing ourselves in texts and discussing the concepts within them. That's what school is for. In middle school, and especially in high school, the students are or should be mature enough to handle the content of the Diary of Anne Frank, especially when reading it under the guidance of a teacher. Moving on. Also in Texas, a black 17-year-old boy was suspended over his hairstyle the same week that Texas outlawed racial discrimination based on hair. First of all, policing people's hair is ridiculous. It's like policing someone's skin color, and for something like this to still be happening in 2023, it's embarrassing and indicative of wayward priorities in education.
A school in Texas is defending its decision to suspend a black student for more than 2 weeks over his hair.
That student's name is Daryl George. He's just 17 years old, and as you can see, he has his hair in twisted dreadlocks. The school first suspended Daryl at the end of August and then just suspended him again yesterday.
All of this is despite a new law in Texas that just took effect. It's called the Crown Act. The acronym stands for, quote, create a respectful and open world for natural hair. And the law prohibits racial discrimination based on hairstyles.
The school states that the boy was not in compliance with the dress code, which states that boys can't have hair past a certain length. Why? I have no idea. They say it's a grooming stipulation, but as long as it's well groomed, then what difference does the length make? Girls have long hair and it's not a problem for them. And when I was in high school, the scene kids would have had a very hard time with those very aggressive side swept bangs. Still, the student kept his hair twisted and tied above his eyebrows and earlobes as per the dress code. His family is now thinking of suing. Now, there's more to be discussed in Texas, there always is, but let's move out of Texas for now and head over to Georgia. A right-wing lobbyist for Education Veritas spoke at a Georgia Senate committee hearing, complaining that a private school teacher wanted her students to say, "Hey y'all," instead of "Hey guys," because it was more gender neutral. Seriously, she took time out of a hearing for this. I say y'all a lot, as I'm sure you've all noticed. I also say guys a lot, and in that context, I use it as a gender-neutral term. I've been saying that since I was a kid in New England, and I say it here in Texas, but some people might disagree with my assertion that it is a gender-neutral term when addressing a group. Some could and do argue that it's a symbol of the patriarchy and that women are addressed using a term usually reserved for men, but mixed groups of men and women are never addressed as gals. And that's a discussion that can be had, and I'm sure some of you will have it in the comment section. Maybe I'll change my mind on all of this later, but sometimes I wonder if discussions like this need to be had at all. There are simply more important things to discuss, especially in regards to what goes on in classrooms. And whenever you take a discussion like this one out of the political microcosm or off of social media, they become almost non-issues. You find that most people in real life aren't bothered by things like this in general speech and just in general company because context matters. Most people who speak this way aren't doing so because they're trying to perpetuate patriarchal norms, and most people don't take it that way. Language and culture are always evolving though, so maybe the term will go away in the future, or maybe its colloquial meaning has changed so much already that it's far enough removed from its original meaning. When you isolate something from its context, you distort its meaning. You can overthink practically anything into oblivion, especially if you're trying to push a larger and more insidious agenda. But generally, if you're going to overthink something, you should be careful to not remove real-world practices, culture, and considerations from the discussion. The woman in this video is wasting everyone's time with this, and I'm glad she was laughed at. I think people should be laughed at when they do funny things. Also, saying y'all in the South isn't exactly groundbreaking. Anyway, there are more stories like the ones we've discussed here that could be discussed, like the teacher in South Carolina whose students reported her for discussing race in the classroom, but I don't want this video to be forever long, so I will leave it there. All I'll say to wrap this up is that I really wish schools would just focus on education and not get caught up in the things that they've chosen to prioritize over the one thing that they're actually supposed to be prioritizing. Imagine a world where efficiency and effectiveness were the only things that mattered, not bureaucracy, not politics, not religious purity, whatever. Just learning for the sake of learning. It could be nice. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like and subscribe to the channel, and be sure to follow me on all of the socials. Also, be sure to check out my podcast, Modern Context. Episode 3 is out right now, and we talk about death. Thanks.